In our exploration of consumerism in Botswana, not only have we uncovered that Botswana consumers' reasons for borrowing money are generally not long-term focused, but now anti-competitive practices within the retail sector, especially by big foreign brands, have come to light. Previous guest Professor Roman Grinberg from the Botswana Institute of Development Policy Analysis, BIDPA, returns this evening, contending that Botswana have largely been blocked out of the important retail sector. And Mr. Thula Kaira, Chief Executive Officer at the Competition Authority, addresses the related concerns. Welcome to First Issues. There are some noteworthy voices who have raised concern at the poor level of participation by Botswana SMMEs in the lucrative retail sector. They argue that small native brands may not have the opportunity to grow as shopping complexes and their big brands encroach even into the rural areas, which previously served as effective incubators for small business. BIDPA's Professor Roman Grinberg has even gone as far as to say that Botswana's malls are instruments of monopoly power. He begins tonight's discussions by explaining what he means when he says the local business person has been blocked from the retail sector.
I actually think that the development of three key sectors is central to the development of a middle class. One is retail, second is construction, and the third is relatively modern or commercial agriculture. Unfortunately, what's happened is more and more of the retail sector is being controlled by a small group of individuals who have access to the shopping malls by virtue of the fact that they own brand franchises. Malls want to maximize the value of their property, and to do that, you just don't let anybody in there. You let in retail outlets that are well recognized, and what you've tended to have up till now is that as each mall is developed, it's the same companies in there, and those brands are usually owned by one person. So what's happening is that the retail sector is being blocked out, right, for people to go upwards, and that really is a serious problem, and the government, I think, really needs to think very carefully about a franchising law in Botswana that forces people, if they own a franchise outlet in one mall, and if somebody comes along and says, I want to open one in Francistown, under current rules, the franchise owner for Botswana has a right of first refusal. They can turn around and say, no, or if you have a good outlet, they can take it from you, right? Under the franchise rule. So if you've invested a lot of time and money in setting up a small franchise restaurant in Francistown, and you want to establish it there, but the franchise owner has one franchise in Gaborone that is sat on for 5 or 10 years, he can say no. All right, so I'm going to build it there instead. That shouldn't be the case. There should be a use it or lose it provision. If you're going to own a franchise, then what has to happen is that after several years, that your rights to Botswana have to lapse if you haven't used and extended your franchise all over the country. I mean, you can't force a franchise owner to develop a place, you can't force the franchising company, which is normally in South Africa, into a situation where they have to accept somebody. No, that doesn't make any commercial sense. But you have to make it more open than it is at the moment.
What is Mr. Thula Kaira, CEO of the Competition Authority's view on this matter? His response to the fact that what initially looks like ownership of a large number of big stores is actually in the hands of a limited few.
The developers of a shopping mall are there to make money. and not just to make any money, they are there to make money according to the targets that they have. So when I want to enter a shopping mall with a business model or a business that the developers or the managers of that mall feel will not return a certain percentage of investment to them, then of course my view is that they have a right to say no to a business proposition. But the question that would be an issue for the competition authority is the no a subject of anti-competitive investigation? For instance, if they are saying, no, you cannot come in because we already have an anchor tenant or a company that is already selling these particular products in this shopping mall, it could be a question that we would pick up to investigate and see whether that is being done to protect the existing shop or a particular shop in that particular, in a shopping mall. Also, given the understanding, even as we analyze, that a shopping mall does not compete against itself. So evidently, as a developer, I don't want to have companies which are profusely competing against themselves within the shopping mall, unless they have this distinct product offering that they are bringing in. What value are they adding to the business? Because I would like to believe that there is no business person who wants to turn down a business opportunity where money will be made.
What has allowed for ownership of the retail sector to be limited to such a small group of people?
One of the complaints, the usual complaints that you find as to why people, the mainstream people are not really investing in the shopping malls, one is the terms and conditions that are there for you to exist or to be on that particular mall. For instance, some of the malls, what they require are branded or or well-known trademarks to exist, or well-known trade names to exist on their shopping malls. So they would, for instance, be very careful to have a brand that is not tested. So the question of bringing in that brand into the country itself is one that requires resources, capital, as well as the human part of capital, and of course negotiating skills. So there is, if I want to bring in a Woolworth franchise or Edgar's franchise at a particular shopping mall, Edgar's, I have to negotiate with Edgar's, I have to negotiate with Woolworth, I have to negotiate with JB Sports and so forth on my own, and then go then to the shopping mall and say, I have got this business license or franchise from a particular well-known brand who wants to set up here. And in that particular sense, you find that if the shopping mall has that kind of profile of having these kind of brand names, then it becomes easy to actually set up there. But it would be difficult for me to go there and, for instance, with Dumela Fashions or Kealeboa Fashions, I hope there are no such names, but I'm just using them as examples, which has no history behind it. And so the shopping mall would sort of ask themselves and say, well, who is going to buy clothes in this kind of profile shop of this particular name? So people with money, people with the business connections, people with the skill to negotiate, get those kind of deals. And they're the ones who set up business in that particular sense. I know, of course, the government has, through the Trade Act, limited or reserved certain retail businesses to Botswana. But of course, there are exemptions that can be granted under the Trade Act to allow for a foreigner to also establish businesses of a much bigger size and not the smaller kind of businesses. So these are some of the things that we are experiencing. Is it anti-competitive? No, it is not anti-competitive. If people with money, people with the skill, and people with the negotiating ability in the country are maybe 10 and 15 or 30 of them, and they're the ones who are able to get the cream of the business. Perhaps what we need to ask ourselves is what should be the solution in order to bring the others on board.
The professor had some noteworthy recommendations to balance out what he feels are skewed practices with regards to the allocation and control of franchise licenses.
It looks often like you have a great deal of competition inside these malls, but that's not the case. Often you'll have 5 or 6 brands would be controlled by one major franchising company. All right. So if you go into, say, Riverwalk, 4 or 5 of the outlets will be owned by famous brands in South Africa, and often one person will control more than one shop, and famous brands will then supply the inputs that you need into your franchise. So you end up in a situation where you end up with more market control in a very small economy and very little room for Botswana to move upwards, because those who've got those places, they don't want to give them up as long as they're making a profit. And you end up with a situation where the retail sector, which is one of the main avenues for the middle class forming in the country, gets blocked, and that's unhealthy. We need to encourage more competition. The Competition Commission's done things. It needs to perhaps be a bit more vigorous in its approach to this. Under existing rules, if you go into most malls, once you have your anchor tenant, which is a supermarket, the provisions of that agreement prohibit somebody coming in there and opening a butcher shop or a bakery, all right, or a fish shop. You can't do that. So there's no way that you can open up most of the small businesses that people are used to. So those malls become instruments of monopoly power in the market. And just telling people go out and find another franchise won't do, because, as I said, the mall owners want a certain number of high-profile franchises to maximize the value of their property, quite rightly. But the government has to ensure greater competition and greater openness to Botswana in getting access to those malls.
The solution is really beyond just the interventions of the Competition Authority. The solution lies in having a skills or training program at tertiary or other level that sort of provides a Motswana who is coming out of the university or coming out of the colleges with these kind of skills that are relevant for them to actually engage in that kind of upmarket entrepreneurship.
It isn't therefore a case of Botswana wanting brands that they are familiar with. It's not a case of brand loyalty that sees us having the same brands in these different malls.
There is obviously an element of brand loyalty in certain products, but the real issue isn't that we want KFC, for example. The question is who owns KFC, and I'm not picking on anyone. I'm just using that as an example. Should it be distributed, or the rights to have a KFC outlet be distributed in a way that allows more people to run KFC outlets rather than just one person controlling the entire country?
In your view, do you feel that the local business person is excluded from the retail sector with regards to the current model?
I wouldn't really say yes, that the local person is excluded from the retail sector. The local person is actually protected to exist in the retail sector. One, you have the Trade Act, which has probably over 30 exempted areas which are restricted to Botswana only. For instance, for the last time I checked, as a foreigner can't open a small grocer, can't open a hair salon, can't open a barber shop, and these are reserved for Botswana. But perhaps the issue that is at stake is the upmarket kind of businesses, you know, the franchises, the shopping malls and so forth. And it's a tricky business, as I'm saying that this particular segment, I wouldn't also say that Botswana are excluded per se, but Botswana may lack the capital that the particular brand or trademark owner wants to have in order for a person to operate that particular business here in Botswana.
And this concept of the anchor tenant?
The anchor tenant is necessary because it's the anchor tenant who brings business to the shopping mall. So if there was no anchor tenant, basically you are having a business model that is without a strategy, or the strategy is less effective because you want the highest return on your investment, and the anchor tenant facilitates that. What is a problem is when a mall can accommodate other shops or other smaller shops, but then you block those other shops from coming in because the existing shops have actually told you not to bring in any other shops. To the extent that those existing tenants influence the entry, even when there's space, vacant space in that particular shopping mall, then that is an anti-competitive practice which we can deal with. We are a government institution. We are not an NGO. So we are here really to facilitate business competition complaints amongst businesses. So where there are those competition problems and people don't understand what those competition problems are, they can actually walk into our office and we can advise. We can actually also attend or be invited. We accept to be invited to their conferences, be they arranged through BOKIM or as a company they've arranged some outing for their staff. We can go there and make a presentation, not more than 30 minutes, to just explain in very simple language what the do's and don'ts within the confines of the Competition Act are. So we are there really to serve the public. Our results may be slow to come, but they are coming. They are in the offing. Some of them have already begun to show.
What exactly has the Competition Authority done within the retail sector, especially in light of the practices that Professor Grinberg has so vividly laid out?
We currently have some cases pertaining to franchise agreements which we are dealing with. I wouldn't want to go into the details, and we're trying to currently understand to what extent that what is going on between the franchisee in Botswana and the franchisor is actually anti-competitive. So you're having some, I think in two of the cases, the franchisor in South Africa has appointed what they are calling a master franchise in Botswana. So a master franchise is like one person who manages the whole territory of Botswana. So this person then is going to operate all the franchise outlets in Botswana. And so those which are already owned and operated by others in Botswana will be taken over at the lapse of the contracts by the franchise owner. So in other words, the franchisor in South Africa just wants to deal with one person in Botswana and not several sub-franchises. So the question before us is that anti-competitive or not to have one company or one person running all the franchise operations in Botswana? So it's an inquiry that is currently underway, and will inform the public, if at all necessary, at some point as to what conclusions we arrive at.
To conclude our program this evening, the First Issues team and our partners First National Bank would like to remember Kyogeditse Sobata, a woman we featured on the show a few years ago after having captured our attention with her achievements and example. Her passing may be making headlines now, but it is her life that is a shining beacon to all, most especially young women, to break the mold, challenge the limitations imposed by perceptions, and above all, to strive for their dreams. As one of the country's first female helicopter pilots, she was fearless in her pursuits and steered the course of her life by her own terms. We at First Issues find it fitting to honor her in her passing, just as we had while she was with us, being the dynamic presence that she was in her professional life as well as she was in her home. The nation is fortunate to have had the likes of Gyogeditse Sobata. May her memory continue to inspire us all.
It is now time for the stock market review, courtesy of the Botswana Stock Exchange.
Good evening. It was a fairly busy week after the Easter break, with the DCI Domestic Company Index declining 1.14% from the previous week. The FCI Foreign Company Index was, however, unchanged for the week. Total turnover for the week was 47.7 million pula, a daily average of 11.9 million pula, and the total number of shares traded was 22.7 million. For a year-to-date comparison, the DCI is down 1.8% compared to a 15.8% increase at this point last year. The Foreign Company Index is, however, up 0.14% compared to a dip of 0.94% at this point last year. Total turnover for 2014 is 743.4 million pula, much better than last year's 389.9 million pula, and the total number of shares traded this year, 209.1 million, much better than last year's 145.9 million shares. If you look at our exchange-traded funds, the Beta Beta ETF rose 25 thebe to close the week at 41 pula 50 thebe, and the New Gold ETF lost 1 pula 30 thebe to close the week at 107 pula 60 thebe. That was your stock market roundup. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.
We thank you for your viewership once again, and we'll bring you, as promised, conversations with commercial banks in response to talk of reckless lending and spending within Botswana's credit space.